You do this?
I think we are.
Oh, it's already starting.
Yeah, hey, you hit go.
Oh, but usually it asks me. All right, let's just do this.
Welcome to the Critical Christian Podcast.
We're your hosts, Dan
and Justin. We ask critical questions about the Bible and provide questionable answers. Dan, we have recently completed chapter 43.
We did. That was like 5 minutes ago.
Which is the first half of Joseph's second meeting with his delinquent brothers.
That's right.
And his youngest brother, Benjamin. Now, we're going to do chapter 44, which is the second half of this encounter, in which Joseph gets to play a very, very interesting trick on his brothers. It's an exciting one.
And then after that, we'll do 5.
I mean, we're almost close to finishing Genesis.
This is crazy.
It's only been almost a year?
Yeah. It'll be about a year.
Well, when you do one chapter a week, and you're doing an in-depth review of each chapter, it's the way things work.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know. It's just, it would be nice to somehow do it in-depth.
That's the problem with in-depth. When you're really going through the text and reading it for everything that you can find in it, you can't just gloss over it. You kind of have to read it and look for the details.
Well, we got to at least do...
What you're good at. Being an English major, you notice details.
Do I?
Yeah. You notice great details.
You're very...
And so many people in the church, and we've covered this already, so many people inside and outside the church reading the Bible, they just kind of skim through the stories just to get through them, and they miss all the important details.
Right.
If you don't slowly go through it, you're going to miss some of the very important details, and sometimes you miss the whole dang point of the story.
That's
right. Let's read our introduction here, chapter 44, verses 1 and 2.
All right. And he commanded the steward of his house, saying, fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack. Also put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, and his grain money. So he did according to the word that Joseph had spoken. So I know his brothers sold him into slavery, but I'm pretty sure Benjamin. And I know I'm ugly, but come on now. So I know his brothers sold him into slavery, but I'm pretty sure Benjamin had nothing to do with it. I know he has a plan, but it's beginning to feel kind of like, jerky. You keep toying with them.
Right. So it's a good point. I mean, clearly Joseph here is working on the setup, right? So he can play like his trick on his brothers.
Yeah.
Obviously, it seems like the point of the setup is to determine whether or not the new favored son is going to be betrayed or rescued by the brothers.
Right, yeah.
Because in the previous scenario, when he was the favored son, he was betrayed by his brothers. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he wants to know if his brothers 22 years later are better people than what they were before. So at that point, being that we know for a fact that Benjamin wasn't involved in the previous plot and that he seems to have some real affection for his brother because he's the only full-blooded brother, seems that Benjamin's kind of like collateral damage.
Yeah, I get that.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Like Joseph has to know that he's going to give some mental anguish to his brother.
Yeah.
But does the end justify the means?
Probably, but
maybe
still not very nice.
I agree. I feel like if you really loved your youngest brother,
right,
you might want to try to find a way that isn't so traumatizing to him.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I mean, he hatched a really good plot.
He did. Here's a question.
Mm-hmm.
How come in the Bible here they don't just say here's what his plan is? Why do I have to read it and then have you tell me what it is? You know what I'm saying?
If you read the whole story all the way through,
uh-huh,
it'd become pretty obvious.
Think so?
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't been obvious yet.
Just like any good story, you don't give the punchline. Oh. You don't give like the whole hook of the story. You know.
So this is for my benefit too, for the reader.
Yeah, the Joseph narrative is like the longest narrative that we have in the Bible.
It is very long.
And in Genesis, it's the most well-written narrative as well. And there's a lot of really believable episodes in it.
Okay.
And all I'm saying is if the objective of Joseph, which is to determine whether or not his brothers have changed, if that objective was just clearly stated 3 chapters ago,
Yeah.
it would kind of ruin the story. Like, this is a story full of suspense and emotion, and like, you don't want to just ruin it up front by giving the reader everything they need to know.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point.
I mean, by all accounts, this is a captivating story.
Okay, so it would have been.
Yeah, you would have to believe that this is being orally transmitted to the children and to other family members and to people in part of the community. I think, the more intriguing and suspenseful the story is, the more people are going to remember it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right?
So it's all right if up until this point, I, think, wow, Joseph's really being a jerk, because everybody else would have been thinking that too.
Right, and no one's going to stop halfway through the story and stop telling the story.
Gotcha.
Like, if you're hearing this, you're hearing the story all the way to the end.
Mm-hmm.
In an oral culture, who's going to be like, all right, children, it's time to go to bed now. You only get half the story.
Right.
you're going to get the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So anyways, verses 3 through 5, we'll see how this setup plays out.
All right. As soon as the morning dawned, the men were sent away, they and their donkey. When they had gone out of the city and were not yet far off, Joseph said to his steward, "Get up, follow the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid evil for good? Is not this the one from which my Lord drinks, and with which he indeed practices divination? You have done evil in doing so.'" Wait, so the Pharaoh drinks from it and also does divination with it?
Yeah.
Man, that's like a busy cup.
The double duty cup.
It is.
Yeah. I had a question.
Yes.
How is it that they didn't check their bags before leaving, considering the last time they left, there was like a strange happening in their bags?
Well, they did have a nice meal, I doubt. I mean, they were probably put very much at ease. And maybe that was part of the plan, right?
Well, they seem to have, I don't want to call it pleasant, but it could have been worse. But they seemed to have a visit last time with Joseph, which they got what they came for, minus leaving their brother behind.
Okay.
And then, they were sent away.
Yeah.
And then they found the extra silver in their backpacks.
Mm-hmm.
How are they to know that this isn't some part of a longer, more elaborate ruse?
Hey, did they ever punish them for all that extra silver they had?
No,
so
they brought it back.
So that could have just been they could have easily just taken it to mean that Joseph's being nice to them.
Well, they could have, but that's what I'm saying is the last time they left, there was a surprise in their bags.
Right.
None of them expected a surprise in their bags.
Well, they probably didn't expect it twice then.
Why not?
Because
if you believe that the highest guy in the land under Pharaoh could be potentially framing you for a crime, and the first time that you found something in your sacks that weren't yours, it was placed there by the other people, the Egyptians,
right?
Wouldn't you check the next time? Like, hey, maybe let's check our bags.
Maybe it would have been considered rude to do that in front of the Egyptians, in front of Joseph.
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh, I wonder how much food he actually did give us. Oh.
That's a good point. I wasn't sure if you were going to come up with that, but that was something that I wrote down in my notes.
Okay.
Is it possible that they did not check their bags because they were in the presence of the steward and the steward's officials, and because it seems clear that the steward and his officials were the ones that filled the bags to begin with? Would that be the equivalent of looking a gift horse in the mouth?
Or a gift donkey, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it would.
So is it possible that the reason they didn't check their sacks wasn't because they're stupid, which would have been my first guess, but because they didn't want to insult the steward.
Right. Yeah.
And say, hey, we don't trust you. Let's look in our sacks.
Well, if not just not insult him, but, bring trouble upon themselves by showing that they don't trust them.
Right. Showing any amount of distrust would have been an insult.
Right. Yeah. And they were already kind of treading water there.
Right.
Thin ice.
Right. Their survival is dependent upon the Egyptians. Right.
Yeah.
And up to now, they don't, I still, even now, I don't think they fully know if the Egyptians are on their side or not.
Right, yeah.
Even despite the lavish meal they were given in chapter 43, I think even up till now, they have to be a little bit suspicious. There's some weird things happening.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, they depart with the bags.
They do depart with those bags. So, here's a question. Why is it always assumed that it will be easy to overtake people that left already? I mean, they didn't even have horses back then, right? And even if they did, was there something special about Joseph's entourage? I don't believe his brothers even had animals or women/children with them to slow them down, right?
Yeah, so in the previous chapter, we read that they brought donkeys.
Yeah. Donkeys.
So they had donkeys.
First, donkeys aren't that fast, right?
No. The donkeys are not that fast.
Yeah, and obviously the Egyptians had to have horses then, right?
Yeah, for sure. The Egyptians started maintaining and breeding and using horses around 2500 BCE. So at least 600 years before this occurrence would have happened.
Yeah.
At the minimum, it could be up to 800 years, depending on when you think this story transpired.
I'm curious how long between them setting out, Joseph said, hey, go overtake them.
Well, that's what it said. If you go back to the passage, it says, the men were sent away, they and their donkeys, when they had gone out of the city and were not yet far off.
I guess that's probably not that far for a city, right?
Right. So
probably traverse a whole city in like 5 minutes with a horse, right?
Exactly. So they weren't far off.
Okay.
And then on top of that, they probably were, it's either they or it's just the Egyptian steward. We don't know how many people. But either way, they weren't far off. And the Egyptians definitely had horses.
Yeah, and I guess the brothers had a lot of extra stuff with them at that point, right? Tons of food and what have you.
Yeah, they brought donkeys. The donkeys were saddled with what it took to make the journey.
I doubt they can walk that fast when they're weighed down so much, right?
No, yeah, depending on the route that you took, it could take anywhere between 7 days to 14 days to even 3 weeks to make that particular journey. It kind of depends on the route. So it was kind of a caravan. It wouldn't have been easy to take all this because they needed provisions. They needed to sleep at night.
Right.
They needed, hell, they probably had weapons with them in case they got attacked on the way. They probably had quite a journey ahead of them. If it was just a steward that went out to meet them, it could be literally just one guy on horseback or one guy in a chariot drawn by horses. You could catch it pretty quick. That's all I'm saying.
Chariots would be pretty fast, I imagine.
Yeah.
Because of those wheels.
Yeah. They had wheels.
Right. Wheels are good.
And some of them not as good as others. The early Egyptian chariots only had 4 spokes. And as you might imagine, they were prone to getting warped.
Oh, okay.
They didn't ride very evenly. They were kind of a problem. Kind of a bumpy ride. But, as time went on, they got better wheels. All that being said, whether you had a 4-wheel or a 4-spoke or a 6-spoke chariot wheel, you're moving faster than a donkey.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, let's do verses 6 through 7, eh?
So he overtook them, and he spoke to them these same words. And they said to him, Why does my Lord say these words? Far be it from us that your servants should do such a thing.
Get the demons out.
Look, we brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money which we found in the mouths of our sacks. How then could we steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? With whomever of your servants it is found, let him die. And we will also be my Lord's slaves. With whomever of your servants it is. Oh, so whoever had it. Yeah, so they're like, saying, go ahead and kill Benjamin. Because they don't realize yet, huh?
Well, yeah, he says, with whomever of your servants it is found, let him die.
You know, the same exact thing happened with Jacob, remember?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Remember when
Yeah.
Jacob left Laban?
Yeah.
Laban sent out a party to go intercept him
Yeah.
because he thought Jacob stole what?
Some of those idols.
Yeah, the teraphim. He believed that Jacob stole the teraphim. They exchanged some words, and Jacob himself offered to murder the one who stole him.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular case, the ante was raised. Whoever stole the item was going to die, and everybody else would become slaves.
Oh.
That's a pretty confident wager.
No kidding, huh?
Right? Now, here's the thing.
Dude, if I was his brother, I'd be like, whoa. He does not speak for everybody.
Well, that's the thing is, given what happened last time, that something was placed in their sacks that they didn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
How did he not know that another trick was being played? If he was accused of stealing something, why would he not think, oh yeah, last time we left, there was some stuff placed in our sack. Maybe we should tread cautiously here.
Right. Yeah.
Don't offer up for dead the person who theoretically might have stole it and offer for servanthood.
Yeah.
Literally everybody else. It's just that's some bad decision making skills there.
Yes, it is.
Right? Even if you're completely confident that you guys didn't do anything wrong, you should not be confident that the Egyptians aren't up to something.
Right. Because they already were.
They already proved that they have been up to no good, right? Or they've been playing tricks.
Right.
How did they not suspect it? I don't know. This, to me, is just either a bad plot hole or bad decision making.
Well, here's a question. So this is really, really similar to the Jacob story. I mean, overtaking them, checking the thing. Yeah, the point is that just a weird coincidence that they have such similar stories?
Yeah, I mean, some scholars have questioned whether or not this story is somehow related to the Jacob narrative. And obviously there are a mix of divided opinions, but I think there's enough different about this story that we might conclude that it's probably not a case of a doublet. Now, we've seen doublets, in fact, triplets, like with the wife of Abraham and the wife of Isaac being kidnapped, because of their great beauty, and then lying about them being their sister.
Yeah.
I think we have clear cases of that going on in some places, but I'm not entirely convinced that this is one of those situations.
All right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it is kind of odd in the Jacob and Laban story. For example, this story about Joseph, we know why it's here.
Mm-hmm.
We know what purpose it serves. It's not quite as clear what purpose the narrative served in the Jacob and Laban episode.
Right, yeah.
Other than they make an agreement that there's going to be a boundary between his people group and Jacob's people groups. So maybe the agreement is just there to kind of demonstrate that there was a boundary between the people groups, and that's how it originated.
Yeah, what were the people groups?
Well, Laban's people and Jacob's people.
Right. Did they have names?
Well, Jacob's people became the Israelites.
I know. What did Laban's people become?
Well, Laban's people were essentially just Syrians.
Oh, it would have been really cool if you had said they were the Canaanites.
No, they
That would have
weren't.
been really cool. I'd be like, yeah, I understand finally.
Yeah, sorry.
But now I don't. All right.
So, anyways, the long and short of it is, I don't think this is a case of a doublet, but it is eerily similar, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, when you read this, you have to be thinking, "Oh, that sounds familiar."
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So it's just a coincidence.
I think so.
That's crazy. It's a crazy coincidence.
It's an interesting one. The difference here,
Mhm.
the big difference, is in the story of Jacob. Remember, Jacob's wife was hiding the household idol underneath of her,
Right.
on the back of her pack animal there, and
Mhm.
it was never found.
Right. Right.
In this particular case,
That's true.
they're gonna find something. Yeah, let's read verses 10 through 13.
And he said, "Now also let it be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be my slave, and you shall be blamed." So who said that?
This is a steward.
All right. So the steward said, "Now let it be according to the brother's words.
Uh-huh.
The brother with whom it is found shall be my slave, and everybody else can go free." Then each man speedily let down his sack to the ground, and each opened his sack. So he searched. He began with the elders, of course. So that's how it is, right? You always go down to the last. Okay. Again with the oldest, and left off with the youngest, and the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes, and each man loaded his donkey and returned to the city.
So it's almost as if the steward or the narrator wasn't listening or were purposely changing things.
Mm.
The brothers specifically said that the one with the stolen item would die,
Mm.
and then all of the brothers would become slaves if the claim was true.
Yeah, but I mean, it seems like the steward was the one saying, we're not going to be that mean.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Listen to what the steward says. The steward says, "Now let it be according to your words." And then he recites a punishment that is not according to their words.
It's similar. It's just not as bad.
That's what I'm saying. It's not according to their words. It's different.
It's pretty close, though.
What's close?
The
brothers say if you find it,
one person will be a slave as opposed to all of them. You know,
that's what I'm saying. According to the brothers, they say whoever stole the thing,
right,
will be put to death,
right,
and then all of us will be your slaves,
right. And he's saying that's not necessary.
That's what I'm saying. He didn't say that.
I know, but he's saying something similar.
But he didn't.
I mean, basically, he's just saying instead of all of you being our slaves, only one of you will. And that's pretty similar. He's just softening it.
And then nobody dies.
Yeah, but
it's completely different.
He didn't. No. We don't know that. He didn't say anything about what was going to happen to the person whose cup was in there. Not yet, at least, right?
He just says, "Let it be according to your words, that with whom it is found shall be my slave."
Oh.
And then all of you will be blameless.
Oh, okay.
So it's completely different. The brothers is saying, "Listen, whoever stole the cup will die, and we'll all become your slaves." And the steward says, "Okay, since he said so, whoever I find a cup with will be my slave, and you'll all be blameless." That's not at all what they said.
Okay. I'm finally on board.
So I
need to edit this out.
Clearly. Really. Well, it's too late. We're live, man. We're doing this Bill O'Reilly style.
No, but okay.
So, as you've already recognized, the steward pretty blatantly changes the punishment.
Okay.
The only thing, which is fine.
Yeah.
The only thing strange here is that he says, "according to your words," but it definitely wasn't according to their words.
Well, if that's so egregious, then maybe that was not really what was written.
Well, that's what I'm saying is I suspect there may be some editing error here. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like a competent editor would have noticed that. That's all I'm saying.
I get what you're saying. I don't know. I guess I didn't think of... I mean, I get where you're coming from, but it just feels to me as though it's pretty similar. He's just, softening the punishment. That was it.
Well, he completely takes away 90% of it.
Yes, but that's softening it, isn't it?
Well, if you committed a crime and I'm going to judge and say, okay, Dan, if you're found guilty, you're going to get the electric chair, and everybody in your family becomes my slave. And then the punishment that you actually get is that nobody in your family gets punished. They all go free, and you don't die. You just have to be my slave.
I'm just saying it's similar. It's similar.
I don't think they're similar at all.
Kind of similar.
What's similar about it?
Well, just because, I mean, it's the same thing, just shifted down one.
I don't think so.
You know, one person gets killed. Okay, now one person is a slave.
So,
everybody else is a slave. Okay, now nobody's a slave. See, it's just one step down for everything.
One person gets killed to nobody gets killed.
Right.
11 people get enslaved.
Right.
To one person gets enslaved.
Right.
And then the 11 don't even get punished.
I'm just saying it's a step down in punishment.
I don't think it is.
But they're both the same.
I don't think there is, because there's more punishments.
Well, I disagree, but
a punishment besides being slaved is you could pay a fine.
Okay.
You could be beaten with rods. You can be given lashes.
Yeah.
You could be made to serve for a period of years and then set free.
Right. Yeah.
So the idea that it's just one step down, I don't know if it's completely merited, because theoretically there's about 100 other punishments you could have. They go from being guilty enough to become lifetime slaves to being completely innocent.
Seems like the only problem here is let it be according to your words, right? That's it.
That's what I'm saying.
So maybe, did you check out the original text to see what actually was said?
No, but
maybe it says let it be according to nobody's words. You know, maybe that's what he said.
Well, I'm all for trying to
Something.
clear up some translational gray areas. I'm not sure there's much gray area here.
Yeah, fine.
Anyways, all I'm saying is that I agree with you. The steward switched the punishment.
Then we're in agreement, sort of.
The only problem is that he doesn't say he's switching the punishment. In fact, he says, this is according to what you say, and then he switches it inexplicably.
Well, I mean, it would be a lot different if he said, you know, let it be according to your words. He with whom it is found shall be, you know, his whole family and everybody around him will die.
Well, that would make it worse.
Right, that's what I'm saying. That would make it even worse. But he's making it better, which I think is okay when it's according to somebody else's words.
I don't know about that.
Like if you were to say, if I were to, I don't know, I'll give you $1, you know? And then later on, you're like, where's my dollar? Wait, that doesn't make any sense. All right, let's edit that part out too.
Remember, this is all live. We're not editing anything.
Well, then I'm going to look pretty foolish.
No, it's okay. Basically, the long and short of it is, there's just kind of a strange phrasing here. And I think it's just because it was edited sloppily.
If you said to me, hey, you promised to give me $1, I mean, you said those were your words, you were going to give me $1, and I said, that's right, here's $5, what would you say?
Well, if I was going to give you $1, and then you gave me $5,
okay,
that would be completely opposite.
I don't know. I let's just go on. I can't argue anymore. We all know you won. All right.
I'm not sure it needs to be argued. I'm just saying that it's a strange happening. Whereas previously in this narrative, the narrative has been pretty clean.
But maybe it's just a bad translation. Let me check it out.
There's not a lot of very strange and glaring plot holes here. You know what I mean? Like this particular narrative, I think, has been really believable and really.
Look at the message.
Really, why would I look at the message?
Well, you're going to look. The steward said, "Very well, then, but we won't go that far."
How many times do I have to tell you that the message is not a translation? The message is an interpretation by a guy named Eugene Peterson, who in the preface of his book goes out of his way to say that this is an artistic rendering of the passage. It is not a translation.
Yeah, but it's a good artistic translation, isn't it?
I agree. It's great.
That's what I was saying. Exactly what he was saying then. You know, yeah, we'll do what you're saying, but we're not going to go that far. We're not crazy.
Right, but
that's exactly what Mr. Peterson is saying.
I know, but Mr. Peterson is not translating the text.
Why did he use those words then?
Because that's what he took away from it.
Right, and that's what I took
But
away
that's not
from
how
it too.
translations work. Translations are not you give your interpretation of what's happening. Translation, you say, well, this word or this phrase means this in another language. So in the
Okay, the New Living Translation. That's fair, the man replied, but only the one who stole the cup will be my slave. So he's like, that's fair. He's like, your words are fair. However,
and again, the NLT is not a direct translation. It's called a dynamic equivalence. In fact, multiple people who worked on that Bible were professors of mine.
Okay.
So what I'm telling you that...
Okay, what about this one? Easy to read version.
That's the same thing.
Said, I agree,
except Dan,
that only,
your laundry list of interpretive translations are not helpful in determining what's in the original language. The original language literally says, Ke devarkem, which means according to your words. That's what it means. It's a pretty literal translation into the New King James.
Maybe it's like an idiom or something.
It's not. According to your words.
I mean, all right, whatever. Let's go on. Obviously, I can't say anything else.
No, I'm just saying, if we're trying to determine, as you suggested, that maybe we should look at the original language to see what's there.
Yeah, but that's only because I thought maybe I would win this argument.
I know, but what I'm saying is, if you want to see what is in the original language, you're not going to find it by pulling up an artistic rendering of the passage. You need to pull up either a word for word translation, which, to be fair, we're using the New King James. The New King James tries to be as word for word as possible. That's why I picked it when we started. Secondly, we have the original language available to us. We just have to look it up in the original language. We don't have to turn to like the Message.
Yeah, fine.
You know what I mean?
We just continue.
I love Eugene Peterson. I've read multiple books by him.
All right.
I just won't read the Message because the Message is not a Bible. You know?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I disagree. All right, so
you're not disagreeing with me. You're disagreeing with the guy who wrote it.
That's fine. I don't care.
The guy who wrote it says it's not a translation.
Well, then I disagree with him. All right. All right. All right, let's go to 14 through 16.
Right.
So Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, and he was still there, and they fell before him on the ground. And Joseph said to them, "What deed is this you have done? Did you not know that such a man as I can certainly practice divination?" So he's saying the only reason he knew is because he looked at his tea leaves and found that somebody had took his cup or something?
No, keep reading.
Oh. Then Judah said, "What shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Here we are, my Lord's slaves, both we and he also with whom the cup was found."
Right. So did he give the impression that he discovered their deceit through divination?
That's what he just said.
Well, that's what I'm saying is I don't think that's actually what's being implied here.
No?
Right. Because what do you use to practice divination?
Oh, tea leaves?
In cups?
Yes.
Which he didn't have because they stole it.
Well, he probably could have used another cup.
Maybe. It wasn't common to have multiple divination cups. You usually had one special cup.
Why?
Well, because that's the way it was.
Like
they were specially made for the purpose
of divinating?
Yeah. Now that being said, that doesn't mean that he didn't have other methods of divining. He could have went to one of the priests. He could have did... could
have used a divining rod.
Not quite. You could do liver reading.
Huh?
Liver reading, yeah.
As gross as it sounds?
Yeah, actually it shows up in the book of Sirach, in the apocryphal texts. There was multiple ways of doing divination. You could also ask certain questions by casting lots and getting the answers. That shows up in the Bible as well. So there were a couple of methods of divination outside of reading something in a cup. And Joseph is implying here, did you not know that such a man as I can certainly practice divination? He might be implying that, hey, did you think that somebody in my position wouldn't have a way of finding out what you did?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Does that indeed, is that like the one true interpretation of this passage? I don't know.
I'll have to look at the message and see.
I don't know if you want to do that. Anyways, the fact of the matter is, it's an interesting phrase, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because he seems to be implying that, hey, if I had not have caught you red-handed, I still would have been able to find it out from God.
Look at this. Joseph accused them, "How can you have done this? You have to know that a man in my position would have discovered this." Oh, so that's interesting.
Yeah,
So
again.
he's not saying it's divination.
Yeah.
He's just saying, I got methods.
Right, but again.
Yeah, I know, but still. Good translation. All right.
But it's not a translation.
Yeah, it's something. All right, so...
I don't know.
It's something.
Eugene Peterson did not translate the Bible.
Oh, whatever. Who knows? Man, who really knows? All right, what do you got? Anything else you want to say?
All right, yeah. So there are a couple things that are interesting here. Now, remember in the book of Genesis, God blesses Abraham because Abraham follows all of his decrees and ordinances and is faithful, which means there were some laws, obviously, that were given. We don't know what, but there was something given, right?
Yeah, I believe it.
Now, something interesting here, in both the Jacob and the Joseph story, there is an item that was theoretically stolen that was specifically used in idolatrous practices. Obviously, the household items, the idols that were stolen by the wife of Jacob, were used for, worshiping other gods.
Right.
But also, the practice of divination was outlawed pretty soundly, according to God himself. In Leviticus 19:26, it says, "You shall not eat anything with the blood, nor shall you practice divination or soothsaying." Next chapter later, Leviticus 20, verse 6, "And the person who turns to mediums and familiar spirits to prostitute himself with them, I will set my face against that person to cut him off from his people." And then Deuteronomy 18:10-12, "Let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter to the fire, who practices divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft, or casts spells, or who has a medium or a spiritist, or who consults the dead. Anyone who does these things is detestable to the Lord. Because of these same detestable practices, the Lord your God will drive out those before you." So if we assume that Elohim was with Joseph, as it says early in the narrative, one must wonder why Joseph seems to be so comfortable practicing divination when it is clearly outlawed later by the same God and is called detestable by that same God. If divination was so wrong and detestable by God, it seems to be at this point in time that he's at least okay with it.
Well, no. It says what we said, that he actually wasn't divinating. He was just saying, "Don't you think I know how to get this information?"
Right. So he says to himself that he has a cup for divination. Are you suggesting that he's lying?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Or just embellishing. I mean, just saying, there's all sorts of ways I could have found it out.
All right. So in the beginning of the narrative, you bring up a good point, because it says, "Also put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest." He doesn't say that the cup is used for divination. And then if you go down later, when he accuses them, the servant, he says, "What deed is this that you have done? Did you not know that such a man as I certainly practice divination?" Is it true?
Can certainly practice.
Right. Is it in fact true that he's practicing divination? Or is it true that he's just claiming that he does? So, for example, in verse 5, he says, "Why have you repaid evil for good? Is not this the one from which my Lord drinks?" So this is a steward. Is this not the cup from which my Lord drinks, and from which he indeed practices divination? So here the steward himself is saying that he practices divination with the cup.
Okay.
And then later, in verse 16, which we just read, when they're brought back to Joseph, Joseph says, did you not know that such a man as I can practice divination? So it seems to be that both the steward as well as Joseph are suggesting that the cup is used for divination. Can we conclude that means that's actually what he was doing?
No, of course not.
Yeah, it's not conclusive, is it?
Very inconclusive.
I mean, it's suggestive.
Yeah, but we all know that he would not do that.
Well, I don't think we know that.
I do.
Why?
Because God would not like it.
Well, that's the thing is,
and he and God are like pals.
Well, why would they make up this false narrative that they stole a cup of divination?
Maybe it was a cup for divination. That doesn't mean that he himself used it in that way.
Right, but that's what I'm saying is, if they're accusing them of stealing a cup used for divination, why make that up? Like,
I didn't say it was. There's nothing wrong with that. Why? There's no reason to say it's made up.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If they didn't make it up,
Yeah.
then it must be true. It must be a cup that Joseph used to do divination.
It said, I don't know, it was the Pharaoh who was using it for divination.
No, Joseph said it, and the steward said it.
I don't think so.
Well, Joseph's not the Pharaoh.
Well, let me check out what the steward said.
Yeah, we'll grab it again.
All right.
The steward says, all right, Stewart says when he catches up with them, actually, we'll just read it for verse 4. When they had gone out of the city and were not yet far off, Joseph said to the steward, get up and follow the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid good for evil? Is not this the one from which my Lord drinks, and which he indeed practices divination?
Hold up. So, Joseph is saying to the steward, say this stuff?
Yes. And then later, when they're taken before Joseph, Joseph says, what deed is this you have done? Did you not know that such a man as I can certainly practice divination? So the steward spoke those words, but he only spoke those words because Joseph told him to.
Is it possible that the Pharaoh is his Lord?
The Pharaoh never shows up here. I don't know why you keep putting the Pharaoh in here.
Because he's a big deal.
Did the Pharaoh ever get mentioned in this passage?
Probably not, but right there in 19 or 18 rather. So
right, but is Joseph the Pharaoh?
No.
Whose cup is it?
Maybe it's the Pharaoh's. That's what I'm just saying.
Why would Joseph have the Pharaoh's divination cup?
I don't know. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know why I would have it, but isn't the Pharaoh the one who practiced divination?
Oh, no. It was culturally practiced.
Oh, you think?
Yeah.
Would the Pharaoh practice it, though?
Well, the Pharaoh would likely have his priests and magicians do it.
Oh, he wouldn't
do it himself.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
All right.
Are you suggesting that this cup is belonging to Pharaoh?
I was, but...
Why?
Because I thought it would be a good thing for it to
You're trying to give an out for Joseph here?
I guess so.
I see what you're doing.
I guess.
You're trying to clean Joseph's hands.
I mean, it's a silver cup.
Yeah,
How many people have silver cups?
He's second in the entire land.
I appreciate that, but it's a silver cup.
That's not hard to come by.
It's worth at least $50.
It's not hard to come by. You're the second person in the entire land. That's like the vice president. You're telling me the vice president can't afford a Rolex?
Fine. All right, you're right. I'm wrong.
I understand what you're doing. You're trying to clear Joseph of what appears to be maybe a sin.
I'm just saying it doesn't feel like it is to me.
Like what is?
Divination. No, I don't feel like he is saying that he practiced divination.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. If he doesn't practice divination, then what is the purpose of making up the story that he does?
What? It's just to say to the brother. Well, it's to show the brothers that he could figure this out, and not just, I'm sure. All right, pause this for a second while I think.
That's the problem with doing live. There's no edits, there's no pause button.
All right. So maybe the brothers are a little skeptical about how he would know this. And so Joseph is trying to throw them off the trail.
So maybe Joseph is, if Joseph is,
I mean, the brothers are going to be like, well, it was obviously him who did it. And Joseph is like, no, it wasn't me who did it. Here's how I know, though. You know?
Right. So this is finally a good point in the whole debate that we're having here over the cup.
Too bad, but at least I found one.
I think this is the point that works in your favor.
Okay, great.
Okay, so if Joseph figured out that they had stolen an item, there's only one of two ways he could have known it.
Right.
The first way is he looked at his table and said, "Where is my cup?"
Right.
The second way is he used divination to do it. But
right, it'd probably just be in the dishwasher or something.
Right.
So that would, he'd have to have something that makes sense, a good reason.
So so there's two good reasons. One is he's saying, "Hey, listen, a man of my stature would find out because even the dang gods would tell me when I divine what happened to my cup." But obviously, from a naturalistic perspective, you can look at the story and say, well, it's his special cup. If it wasn't at the spot where it usually is, he might assume that it was stolen.
Okay.
Right? So there's two plausible answers. One of them suggests that he's lying about practicing divination, and one of them doesn't.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, if I lost a cup, I'm not sure my first reaction would be to say, hey, go find those people and look in their sacks. I'd probably be like, did somebody wash it or put it in the wrong cupboard or something?
But if they're being framed, it's a perfectly plausible scenario.
Yes, it is, if they're being framed, which is why he had had to have a perfectly plausible reason for knowing.
Right, which is my cup is missing, and the people who were last with me who saw my cup are gone.
Maybe he was just being overly cautious because he was worried they were going to find out.
What?
Maybe he was just being overly cautious. He's like, yes, obviously, if I noticed it was missing, whatever. But at least this way he can say, but here's another reason. I don't know. This is why I'm not a good debater. Okay?
I know. The problem is, this is the first time you've entered into this discussion.
Yeah.
And you're thinking through it, like while you're talking to me about it. Whereas I've actually had this discussion before. Right?
Well, then you're cheating.
I'm a little bit cheating.
All right.
I've had this discussion with multiple people, so I've kind of already went through the points. So I got a little bit of an advantage. It doesn't mean I'm right, and it doesn't mean that there aren't other points that maybe both of us are missing. All I'm saying is it's interesting. Nobody in Genesis is really ever punished for doing things that are like later against the law of Moses, right? Like offerings on the hilltops, not a problem at all, even though it gets outlawed later, So I'm not entirely sure that divination is that big of a deal right now.
I'm just saying he probably didn't do it, but even if he had, is it possible that he was doing divination for God?
Yeah.
Just saying like, all right, I'm going to divine these things. God, please tell me.
Yes, that's perfectly plausible.
I mean, that was the lots, right?
Yeah.
Clearly, I mean, if God didn't specifically say, here's how I'm going to respond, then that would definitely be a sin. Right?
Yes. So practicing divination is altogether not dissimilar from casting lots.
Yeah.
Nearly the same thing. The difference is who or what are you invoking
Mhm.
to give you the divine information? And according to the laws given by Moses,
Mhm.
it seems somewhat clear that the divination being outlawed is to foreign gods, ancestors that have passed, familiar spirits,
Yeah.
so on and so forth. Whereas God only wants you to come to Him,
Mhm.
which is what casting of lots is. When you cast lots, you literally go to the priest, and the priest casts lots for you in the official manner.
Mhm.
So, is it possible that the practice of divination here is not that big of an issue? Divination is not necessarily the problem. The problem is when you practice divination as a form of idolatry, which I don't think Joseph was doing,
No.
right?
Yeah.
So, all the way back to kind of where we started, is divination that big of a deal? And I don't know that it is.
Depends on who you're
Divining.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm.
And I think that's perfectly fine. And so, and here's a side question, and we've gone really long on this point, but side question. If you get a group of church people together and you put a Ouija board in front of you and you pray to Yahweh for an answer, and an answer shows up on the Ouija board,
Okay.
is that evil?
Boy, I have no idea about that one.
Fair question.
I mean, I don't know, because I feel like just the fact that it's a Ouija board kind of inviting evil to act as good.
What about a Ouija board invites evil? Is this a board with a bunch of letters and numbers on it?
Yeah, but we all know what it originally was made for, right?
Does the manufacturer of the board have to demon possess it before they ship it, or does it get demon possessed when you buy it?
When you use it.
Or is the board itself irrelevant? It's what you do with it. Because you can easily do what you would with a Ouija board by casting lots.
Right.
You're just trying to divine the will of something.
Yeah.
Or get answers from a divine entity. You can do that with any number of things. It doesn't have to be a Ouija board. So as far as I can tell, there's no difference between a Ouija board, casting lots, reading tea leaves, reading livers.
We'd have to be on the assumption, though, that we can actually determine who will give us answers based on who we ask to give us the answer.
Yahweh.
Well,
Right?
yes, I understand, but we have to. I mean, that has to be the unequivocal truth. Otherwise, you are opening yourself up to like demons or what have you, to pretend that they're giving you a godly answer.
That's what I'm saying. If you put a bunch of people on a Ouija board and you're just asking Yahweh for an answer, what part of that would be evil?
Well, let me say this. Maybe it's not evil. Maybe it's just misguided to think that God would respond in that way instead of a demon.
Right, but if a demon, if all it takes is for you to make a bad decision about touching a game made by Mattel or whoever makes it,
Uh-huh.
it seems like an awfully strange loophole that the demons have. All you have to do is try to pray to God the wrong way and they can get in. Seems like an awfully bad setup. The God of the universe
You know what?
can only keep you safe as long as you perfectly
It's
understand.
the same thing with casting lots. You had to go to the priest for that.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to use Ouija boards
Yeah, but
with a certified priest.
Yeah, but you didn't get demon possessed if you cast lots the wrong way.
Get demon possessed from a Ouija board either.
Well, no one's getting. Let's be honest. Nobody's getting demon possessed from using a Ouija
I
board.
didn't say that they were.
I know.
I was just saying they might try to give you bad answers, bad advice, what have you. Which is just how casting lots would be.
Right. So, do you think the demons made the lots come up with the bad answers?
The lots?
Yeah.
Well, unless God, well, it's either demons, chance, or God. Those are your three options.
Right. And God explicitly sanctions casting of lots. I'm just asking.
Yeah, but only if you're like with a priest. Right?
I agree. Okay. So, if you go to a priest, say you go to 5 priests and give 5 priests a Ouija board and ask the priest to divine an answer from Yahweh, is that evil?
Probably not.
Mhm.
That's my guess, because it's a lot like casting lot.
Right.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I can't find anything evil about that. And it would be awfully strange. I know a lot of people are like, you just mentioned Ouija board, and they're like,
Yeah.
oh, you're going to get demon possessed. I saw The Exorcist, I know, or something, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, no matter what your method is, if you're looking to Yahweh for an answer, I have a hard time that Yahweh is going to be like, nope, let the devil have him. You know what I mean? Like, it just seems like if you had a child and your child came to you for an answer, but you're like, well, you didn't use the approved method. Now I got to give you over to the devil. That's kind of silly, isn't it?
Yes, I agree.
Right?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not, yeah.
It's like I literally had a professor, he taught missions in Bible college. He honestly believed that people who were engaging in what's that weird stretching?
Yoga?
Yeah, he honestly thought that people who were engaging in yoga were opening themselves up to demon possession because some of the poses came from the Eastern religion and were invoking some of the gods that were worshipped in Eastern religion. And therefore, if you go to a yoga studio and you practice those poses, you could be demon possessed. And that, to me, is as silly as suggesting that, well, if you own a Ouija board, automatically that means you're opening yourself up to the devil. It just is kind of an odd conclusion, you know?
I understand what you're saying.
It just seems like a kind of a flawed system. If we consider that theoretically we're all God's children and he loves us.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, should we... Did we sufficiently beat that horse into the ground?
It's pretty dead now. Yep. Okay. Where are we at?
I think we're...
Oh, I haven't read that one. So.
Verse 17, right?
All right. But he said, far be it from me that I should do so. The man in whose hand the cup was found, he shall be my slave. And as for you, go up in peace, your father.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it. I'll be interested to see what the purpose of this story is, because right now it just looks like a story of vengeance. But of course, we all know that's not true. But when I was reading this, I definitely thought that. Yeah, I mean, I know that now it's some sort of circuitous plot to see if they would, throw Benjamin under the bus.
Right.
But as you're reading it, you do have to wonder, where are they going with this? I mean, say they were doing this orally, you'd be listening for like an hour and a half going, okay, this guy is a man of God, right? What's the point? So, I don't know. That's it.
I think obviously you've already ascertained, you've already divined the situation here at hand.
God, he said it, not me.
And I think you're right. Obviously, this is all just kind of a ploy, but it's interesting that the ploy, even by Joseph, seems to be setting up like a mirror image of what happened to him. For example, initially, remember the brothers offered that the one who had the cup would die, and then they would all become slaves. And then Joseph, along with the steward, changes it and says, no. Whoever stole the cup will become my slave. Okay, not much difference there between Joseph becoming a slave and sold into Egypt, and now another person becoming a slave and sold into Egypt.
Right.
The only question is, in this situation, which seems to be the same situation, will the brothers come to the rescue of the one sold as a slave to Egypt, or will they let him rot in his enslavement?
Mm-hmm.
Now, to be honest, up to this point, it could be either way. They left Simeon for 1.5 years in prison.
Yeah.
Who's to say that they wouldn't leave Benjamin for the rest of his life the same way they left Simeon, the same way that they left Joseph?
Mm-hmm.
So this test is kind of important
Mm-hmm.
because up till now, they have not demonstrated fully that they really are all that changed.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I will say that I mean, we've read all of Genesis other than the finishing up with the Joseph narrative, and I don't think any of the stories, narratives, what have you, have been this long.
No.
Right? And not only is this long, it feels like he doesn't really say that much. You know what I mean? Like, this is a story that could have been told in 2 chapters, probably, instead of 12.
Yeah, certainly could have been.
So, I don't know. Seems weird to drag it out.
Well, so the Joseph narrative traditionally has been credited as being the foundational narrative of the northern tribes of Israel. Joseph is the main patriarch of the northern tribes. So it's possible that being that this was like their main source narrative, that, they wanted to make sure it was quite robust.
I'm sorry, why was he the main guy for the North?
But think about the 2 children that came from Joseph that were given a double portion. Remember, so Joseph, when Jacob is on his deathbed and he's giving out blessings and whatnot for his children, Joseph gets a double portion. A double portion ends up going to his sons.
Because he's dead?
No, he's not dead yet.
I don't know.
But Joseph gets a double portion because he, among all the brothers, is the favored.
Yeah.
But only in the part of the narrative which is told by the Elohist.
Okay.
If you read the Yahwist portion of the Joseph narrative, Joseph's not all that special. The narrative's not all that long, and it's always Judah that's the hero.
Mm-hmm.
So both the North and the South had access to this narrative, obviously. But in the North, this was a critical foundational narrative. And when the Southern tribes, when they went through and edited their story with the Northern story, they just took this longer narrative and compiled it with their shorter narrative, probably cut a few things out, as they typically do. And that's how we have this really long narrative. It's foundational to both the North and the South. But because it was so important to the North, they already had a longer version of it.
I'm sorry, who were Joseph's children?
Ephraim and Manasseh.
And they were important to the North because...
The very first king of the North.
Uh-huh.
You never guess what tribe he was from.
Ephraim?
You got it. Ephraim.
Okay.
Yeah, all and the main center in the northern tribes was Shechem. And Shechem shows up over and over again as being a place in the narrative that is unique, but is explicitly cursed by the Yahwist. In the Yahwist narrative, Shechem gets overrun by the brothers and completely demolished and destroyed.
Okay.
Which is odd because 1 chapter later, the brothers are back in Shechem shearing their sheep, which theoretically couldn't happen because Shechem was completely destroyed.
So what's your reasoning?
What I'm saying is about Shechem or about Joseph?
Yeah, Shechem.
Well, I'm saying is there's 2 narratives about Shechem. The Yahwist condemned Shechem by using the narrative that Shechem had raped Dinah, and then the brothers completely destroyed Shechem. But obviously that didn't really happen. That was just part of their narrative because just like a chapter or 2 later, remember...
Then why did they include that if it's so obvious that it didn't really happen?
Because it was part of their cultural narrative. It wasn't part of the northern narrative.
But since they disagreed on that so much, they just had to add both and say whatever.
Well, that's what I'm saying. These stories went hundreds of years worth of editorial work. They were originally separate narratives. They probably at one point got generically and sloppily put together, and then somebody worked them over, maybe a dozen times to try to smooth them out.
Mm-hmm.
but not enough to clear up all the plot holes. You cannot get around the plot hole that the entire city of Shechem, man, woman, and child, was destroyed and carried off. And then just a year or two later, there's a whole civilization there.
Okay, well then let me ask you, how do Christians get around that?
They don't notice it. Christians do not read the text closely enough to find these problems. They just don't look at it. And the fact of the matter is, even a lot of educated Christians don't know. Because again, everyone comes to the text looking for something. And then you kind of miss the other things that you're not looking for. But the more times you read it, the slower you read it, the more times you start to recognize, hey, that's kind of weird. How did they destroy every human being in the city, carry off the women and children, and then just a year or two later, there's a whole civilization there, and the city seems to be a thriving, city center again.
Yeah, also, you would have thought they would have been punished.
Yeah, and how are they going back there,
Right.
asking the random man in the field, have you seen my brothers, when just a year or two ago, those brothers killed every family member and every person you've ever known from that town.
Right.
You know what I mean? The whole thing is a giant plot hole.
Yeah.
All that to say, Genesis, as we've already demonstrated, has a really strange combination of texts from the north and the south. And the Joseph narrative is the most preciously held foundational narrative to the north. Both Jacob and Joseph are tightly and dearly held among the north. Obviously, remember Jacob in his travels is always referring to Elohim, sometimes Yahweh. Isaac and Abraham, on the other hand, mention Yahweh over and over and over and over and over again.
All right, so it's not that they're held so dearly to the north. It's that those were their stories.
Yes.
And the stories that the south held dearly were not part of the north. Well, maybe?
They were secondary. For example, if you were from the state of Virginia, you would absolutely love George Washington because he came from your state. He was the first president. He was your hero. If you were from Georgia, your favorite hero of early American history might be the first president that came from nearby where you were from. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
So everyone's foundational narrative, the heroes in their historical texts, are going to be different.
They just felt close.
Yeah.
You're saying, okay.
Yeah, the South definitely knew about the Joseph narrative and the Jacob narrative, but those two patriarchs weren't as closely associated with Judah as they were with the northern 12 tribes.
Okay.
Right? So all that to say, though, you probably had a long version of the story because Joseph was so important to the north. And you had a short version of the story, which emphasized Judah being awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then they eventually got combined.
Because Judah was the Joseph of the South.
Basically.
Bam.
And they got combined to make an even longer story.
Okay.
Which is why we got this long freaking story. And it only gets longer because the next book, not just a couple chapters, but the entire next book is dedicated to Moses and Aaron. So if you thought the Joseph narrative was long, wait till you get to the entire book just dedicated to Moses and Aaron.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So anyways, the long and short of it is the closer you get to actual history, the longer the narratives get because you actually have information. Right? Think about the narratives early on in Genesis. They're like half a chapter, one chapter.
That's an interesting way to put it.
Because they don't really have that much information. How much information do you really have about Nimrod from, before the Hebrews even knew how to write?
Or how the earth was formed.
Right, exactly.
Right?
But once you get to the time of Moses, where you have language developed, you have detailed records from multiple cultures, you have flourishing city centers who have oral culture. Well, now you've got a large amount of data to pull from. And so naturally, the amount of data that you could tell about that particular individual or that particular narrative just grows and grows and grows. Just like you and I only know a handful of stories about the founding fathers, I assume. But we could talk for weeks about what just happened with the last two presidents, right? Because it's closer in time frame to where you and I live. So, and we have means of communication. We have the internet now. Think about just how different life is that you and I have the internet. We have access to more information than our parents could have ever dreamt of having in the 70s and 80s. And because we have access to more information, we have a wider knowledge of what happened in the past. So I would say just like Genesis, when you get to Exodus, they have more information and they have a wider knowledge of what was happening in the recent history.
Okay.
So the stories just get longer.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good explanation. I like it.
Did we read 17 already?
Not to mention
I've lost track.
Not to mention the fact that this story is very important for both of them, just because it explains how they all become slaves, right?
Yeah, isn't it kind of interesting that the story might be hinting at the future, that they're all going to become slaves in Egypt?
Yeah.
Foreshadowing, is that the word for it?
Yeah, that is definitely it.
I think it's possible that the story is perhaps foreshadowing this future. Yeah.
Crazy.
I agree.
All right.
Yeah.
What's next?
I think we need to read verses 18 through 19.
Then Judah came near to him and said, "O my lord, please let your servant speak a word in my lord's hearing, and do not let your anger burn against your servant, for you are even like Pharaoh. My lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother?" All right, so verses 19 through 33 are literally just a retelling of what happened 2 chapters ago. This is what the authors of Genesis thought we needed, apparently. It's already the 4th largest book in the Bible, so 3rd if we don't include Psalms. 1st if you don't include Isaiah and Jeremiah. No way we needed that. Okay.
Yeah. Now, my assumption is that, and we've mentioned it before, some of the reasons for like the repeat storytelling is because, and many scholars have pointed this out, there's a lot of literary devices in this narrative, like chiastic structures. And so some of it might have just been artistic editing, and some of it could be because the editors wanted some of the most important parts to be repeated, because this is oral culture, and the more times you repeat something in the story, the more likely it is that something gets remembered. So that's my guess why you've got so much repetition. And to be fair, the 3rd alternative is that, the editor could have just been either sloppy or lazy, but in this particular case, I don't think that's what's happening. I think
that'd be really sloppy.
I know. I think it's part of a larger chiastic structure, because they are super, super common in the Joseph narrative. Somebody spent some time going through it. And remember, up till now, the Joseph narrative seems to be the most well-written narrative we've read.
Yeah.
It's got lots of believable details. It's got lots of character development. So it shouldn't be surprising that it's got also a lot of artistic literary devices as well. Does that make sense?
Got that. All right, ready for the last one then?
Yeah, last 2 verses.
Now, therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. For how shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me, lest perhaps I see the evil that would come upon my father? Boy, he's a lad. Isn't he like 30 now or something?
Well, he's probably I had to guess, anywhere between 25 and 30.
Yeah, not much of a lad, right?
And so we actually, the last time we talked about lads was in Genesis 22 with the Isaac being sacrificed narrative.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And we discussed the fact that not really sure how old Isaac was, whether or not he was really a lad. And we had a similar problem with Ishmael when Ishmael was sent away with his mother in the desert.
Yeah, that's true.
Was he a child or was he a lad?
Yeah.
We kind of have a similar problem here. Whereas if we assume that Benjamin, whatever, was at least a couple years old, let's say he was 5 years old when Joseph was sold.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we know that 22 years have passed, which means he's got to be at least 27.
Mm-hmm.
Is 27 still a lad? Is this maybe an anachronistic feature in the text? Because later we read that the Pharaoh in Genesis, the Pharaoh that built the storehouses was Ramses. But Ramses, according to the biblical timeline, didn't live for like another 200 years.
Oh.
So, as we've seen, Genesis is not great with timelines. It's possible that in one telling of this narrative, Benjamin was actually really young. And maybe in another telling of the narrative, he was a little bit older. And when they combined the narratives, just kind of got overlooked.
Like, for instance, in one narrative, Joseph might have been away for 2 years instead of 22. Right? And that would make Benjamin still a lad.
Right. And that's the thing is because there's certain parts of the story that give you like age markers.
Mm-hmm.
And usually age markers are given by the northern tribes, by the priestly source. Priestly source is very concerned with ages and lineage.
Okay.
But again, they're from the north. They're not Yahwists. That being said, it's quite possible that when the Yahwists, the priestly, and the Elohists got combined, that, well, if you don't put the age markers in the right order, then it's hard to know like who was at what age and when they, it might have made sense in the original story, but now it no longer makes sense.
Yeah.
How old was Benjamin here? We don't fully know, but is he a lad? Not so much. Now, lad is flexible. It could be as young as 5. It could be as old as somebody who's about to get married. So we see elsewhere in the Old Testament that the underlying word for lad, which I assume is na'ar, gets used to refer to somebody who is a full-grown adult but is ready to be married. But also, we know that full-grown adults ready to be married quite often are still pretty young anyways. They could be in their teenage years. So they're still a lad. What we don't know, if somebody is damn near 30, especially in the ancient world, are they still a lad? I don't know.
Well, maybe they're a lad when all your other brothers are a lot older. And so it's just a thing. He's always their kid brother.
Right. So this is what it says. Excuse me. That's a good point. It says, now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my Lord. So here, it's possible that the usage of lad is not necessarily because the narrator knows that it's a lad, but because the older brother is referring to this person as a lad because it's his younger brother.
Right.
And no matter how old you are, you might refer to your brother as your kid brother.
Right.
Even if your kid brother is 30.
That's true.
Right? So it very well could just be the way that he was using language because it's his little brother. Right?
So this is how you can tell the story was written by the South, right? Judah is now a bona fide martyr for his younger brother. We're going to ignore all his bad parenting and the daughter-in-law having, died.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting that earlier when we hear the story of Judah, he's not painted well.
Right.
The story of Judah and Tamar does not have him coming off as being a good dude. But when we get to this text, which clearly seems to have a lot of Yahwistic editing, somehow Judah's now the hero,
Yeah.
right? I agree. It's pretty crazy. I did have some notes here, but I think we mentioned them earlier. Basically, that finally we've come to the completion of what Joseph was trying to do. He's just trying to frame his brother up.
Yeah.
The very next verse, which we don't have here, starting in the next chapter, shows the result of the setup.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so Joseph's masterful plan seems to be nearly complete. And remember when he was being sold into Egypt? Which brother was it that spoke up, that said, no, don't kill him, sell him to the Ishmaelites instead?
I'm going to say Reuben.
It was Judah.
I'm going to say Simeon.
It was Judah.
Judah. Got it.
So interestingly enough,
Yeah.
Judah, the one who suggested sell him as a slave rather than kill him,
Mm-hmm.
now is offering himself up as a slave.
Doesn't that seem too perfect?
It's the tables have done a perfect turn.
Right, but I'm just saying, isn't it too perfect for this story? You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
like
maybe.
it was written that way, but
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Is it written too perfectly to be believable?
I'm asking. That's what I'm asking.
I think it's believable. Because what if this? What if Judah, all these 22 years, has had the guilt of saying, hey, let's sell our brother into Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
and then believing, oh, he must have died in Egypt, and then having that on your shoulders when maybe what you should have said is, hey, let's not do anything to our brother. He's our brother.
Right.
Right? If they were willing to listen to you and sell you as a slave as opposed to killing you, then by nature of the suggestion, they would have possibly listened to you if you said maybe we should preserve his life another way.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe Judah was just really guilty and he felt like, you know what, it's my responsibility. I let the first one slip through, did the wrong thing. I won't make the same mistake with the second one. Like I told you, I think I've told you the story before. Guilt does funny things to people. When I was working at a church, I had a lady come in and start confessing a very serious felony to both me and my coworker at the church. And the guilt had eaten on her for so many years that she just had to go and confess it to somebody. And we had to sit there and tell her, unfortunately for you, much as we love you and we believe that God would forgive you for this thing, we are mandatory reporters and we have to call the cops and let them know that you've confessed this to us. But you know what she did? She very calmly and rationally waited for the cops to be there and agreed to be taken into custody and pay what she needed to pay for this crime. Because the guilt had weighed on her so long, she was relieved. Even though the punishment was coming, the punishment was not as heavy as the guilt. That makes sense?
Yes, it does.
Guilt's a terrible thing to live with.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyway, I say all that to say this. It's possible that Judah here is actually just reacting out of his own guilt.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Anything else?
All we got.
Anyways, guys, thank you so much for being here. We got lost in the weeds a little bit.
Yeah.
We got lost in the weeds.
A lot.
I think they were important discussions, though. Like whether or not Joseph practiced divination.
Right, yeah, that was a long one.
But it is kind of important.
Yeah.
If he was doing it, we need to understand what he was doing. Right. Was it wrong? Yeah. And all that to say, I'm sure there are parts of that discussion that you and I didn't think about. And I can guarantee there's somebody in the comments right now thinking, oh, you missed this. And it's probably true. So listen, guys, if you think that we missed something, if you think that we're crazy, let us know in the comments, because we're okay actually on this particular podcast admitting that we don't actually have all the answers. That's kind of the point of doing this, is to discover what answers we can, and through the power of multiple heads being put together, not just ours but the audience members in general, we can actually come up with a lot of good answers. And in fact, I've had this happen online where I've written blog posts and I've had somebody comment in my blog posts something that actually made more sense than what was in my blog. And I'm like, that's a really good answer. I need to go back and edit my blog now to include that particular answer and give somebody some credit in the comment section. So all that being said, hey, listen, we're open to all kinds of answers and suggestions on all the topics that we read about. We're not offended at all to be wrong, right? Sometimes you have to be wrong before you can be right.
Yes.
Right?
I guess. Yes. Or wrong.
Sometimes you're wrong and then wrong again, though.
Yeah.
That's also true. You can be wrong more than once. That happens all the time. Right? All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for being here. And then next week, we're going to read about the conclusion of this fantastic plot by Joseph to frame
oh boy
and discover his brothers.
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to get emotional.
Very emotional.
It'll be a family affair.
Oh yes.
But not like just sleeping with another woman type of affair, but like a happening.
Right, yeah.
No one's sleeping with anyone's concubine. That already happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Or their daughter-in-law.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
In fact, now that you bring it up, I don't think there's any more like rapes or sexual assaults or anything like that left in Genesis.
Oh, wow. With 6 chapters left, we're safe.
Right. We finally got through all of the horrible things that God's people does.
I don't know if that's true, but we'll see.
As it turns out, when we get to Exodus, there will be more awful things.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Awful things in the Bible. Wow.
I know. Never at all, right?
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you again next week.
All right.